Hello everyone. So in my last session, I showed how to set up or how to start working with the Sitecore Forms engine. I promised in my last video that I was going to show how to set up Sitecore 9 with the Sitecore Install Framework. So that's the purpose of today's session. There's kind of two parts to using SIF or the Sitecore Install Framework. First is setting up your computer to use SIF, and then there's the actual running of the PowerShell script to use this Sitecore install framework to install Sitecore on your machine. So today I'm going to focus on getting all the prerequisites installed on your machine. I'm just going to walk through some of the challenges I had when I went through this. You might have different challenges if you're in a different environment, so this might not apply to everybody. So out of the box, when you first get started getting going with setting up your Sitecore 9 instance, you're going to want to refer to the Sitecore 9. You'll see that there's a list of resources. You want to download the installation guide. I will admit that the installation guide can be a little confusing. There's a little different parts to this. One of the key places to kind of refer to getting started is these prerequisites. There's some system hardware related prerequisites, and then there's software that you're going to need on your machine as prerequisites as well. So here's a quick list. There's the web administration module. This is something that will be installed with IIS by default, so you should have it already on your machine. Some other pieces that you can install using the platform installer, which if you've never used that before, it's as simple as going into IIS and clicking on Get New Web Platform Components, and this will basically install or open up your web platform installer. So that's where you can see those options to pull those options in for Web Deploy 3.6 for hosting servers and URL Rewrite 2.1. Some other things you need is the DAC-FX. This is so you can pull in DAC files, which will be in your WDP files. I just said a bunch of terminology really quick, but your web deployment packages have DAC files, which are basically just SQL backup files, fancier backup files that you're going to include in when you're running your Sitecore install framework. Those files are going to need to be pulled in. So that's what this DAC-FX is going to do. You're also going to need your SQL Server Transact SQL script DOM, which will be installed with Visual Studio by default. So most of you should have, especially if you're planning on doing development in Sitecore 9, you're going to have that on your machine anyways. And then there's some other prerequisites. I don't see them listed, but these are bigger prerequisites. Is SQL 2016. If you're going to be doing Sitecore 9 locally, Sitecore 9 locally, then you're going to need SQL 2016, especially if you're working with the XPO or XP1 topologies. If you're working with EX or XM only, which means basically content management setup, then all you're going to need is, in that case, all you need is SQL 2014. But most developers on their local machines are going to be running XPO, which is everything's going to be installed in that one instance. You're not going to have separate instances for XP1, XP2, etc. And then the next piece that you're going to need, which is probably the most complex to set up, especially if you're a .NET developer like me, is Solr. They recommend 6.6.1, but anything above that should be fine as well. So let's get kind of started on Solr. I think it's probably the most complex of the things to install. So you're going to go out to Solr's website. You're going to go and find the version that you're looking for. So let me just go out real quick. So you're going to go to Solr's website. So once you load the Solr website, you can go over to download. And what I did is I just went to past versions. You're going to just look for 6.6.1. So you can click on this, and then you have access to the zip file. Basically, you're going to unzip it to your C drive. Typically, I like to put it under Solr and then the version number under your C drive. Where all your stuff's installed. And once you have that, you're good to go for solar. Now what you want to do is you're going to want to do two things. You're going to need to set up SSL for solar, and you're going to need to set up solar so it runs as a Windows service. Without Windows service running, then it won't adequately run the site, and you won't be able to use your Sitecore Install Framework to use solar to set up indexes for ConnectX and some of the other things part of the new version of Sitecore that require solar. The next thing that you're going to really want to do is set up configure paths. So solar runs on Java. Because of this, that's actually another prerequisite I forgot to mention. You're going to need JRE. I think it's probably the latest version of JRE is what you need installed. If you're in a command prompt, you can just go ahead and I believe you can just say Java version, and there is your Java version. So if you're running 9, you should be fine. So then you make sure you have Java installed. Obviously Solar will not work if you don't have Java. So once you have Java installed and you have Solar set up here, you're going to need to set up SSL. There is a guide provided by Solar. So if I do Solar SSL, there is this document enabling SSL for Solar. Skipping over one step is you're going to have to set up, like I said, paths for Java. So to do that, all you have to do is type in advanced. You're basically going to want to open up this view advanced system settings. Once that opens, you're going to see environment variables. You're going to click on that option, and you need to set up a Java home, which is going to be where your Java instance lives. And then you're also going to need to define paths. So if we click on edit, you can see that I have defined 3 here at the bottom. I'll explain what NSSM stands for, but basically this is my Java. This is OpenSSL. So that's what this is, OpenSSL, which it tells here down here in the SSL documents how to set up SSL for Solar. It mentions that you need to have OpenSSL. So that's what this path represents. Basically, all this will allow you to do is that you can run in your command lines. You can run some of these commands like OpenSSL. Otherwise, you'd have to have the full path for that, which would be this plus OpenSSL. And then NSM, which I'll explain what that is here in a moment. So these are in the documents for Sitecore 9 prerequisites. It doesn't mention that you need to have OpenSSL, and it doesn't mention you have to have NSSM, but these are kind of prerequisites that I found that you need in order to set up SSL or to set up your Solar instance for running Solar on your machine, so that then you can run the Sitecore Install Framework. Once you have all those defined, these paths, then you should be able to start running command lines to set up, basically to run through this checklist over here. Basic SSL setup, you're going to basically create using a key tool, which is in the JavaScript by default. So by setting up the path to JavaScript, or not JavaScript, Java, you have access to this key tool now. So you can run these key tool commands. So basically what you're going to do is create a self-signed cert that's using the key tool command. And you're going to basically, really the important part is making sure that you have IP 127.0.0.1, and you also need to make sure that you have localhost defined. You don't need this IP 192.168.1.3 defined, but if you have other IPs that map to localhost, you can definitely define those as well. Camfiggy also has a script that I'll link to from this post that has all these steps all in one script. So it's one PowerShell script. You just run the PowerShell script and it basically generates all this. You're going to want to run this command in a folder that has in a location where you can find the thing. So typically what I've done is create something called a resource files folder. And this is where I've installed all my stuff to do with the Sitecore Install Framework. I think in the documentation for Sitecore 9 Install Framework, it actually mentions creating this folder. So I didn't just create it willy-nilly. I actually had a reason to call it this. You can put that as the location of where it will create the SSL cert. And then you can use that to then move it or place it where it needs to go. As you run through this will create a cert file, and then you need to create a P12 file, which is something that you then can install locally. And then you're also going to go through a few more steps here on just creating an OpenSSL cert for it as well. I don't know if all these steps are required, but they seem to work fine for me if I went through all these steps. So I just went ahead and did all the steps. And basically what you end up with is and I've already moved this location so I could make sure it mapped to something I'm going to show you here in a second for setting up Solar. But these are the files that it creates. So once you're done setting up that, there's one more step that you have to do, which kind of caught me by surprise as I ran through this a couple of times, and as that you need to also install this cert. So there's an option to install PFX, or if you double click, it'll basically install this certificate on your local personal certificate store. So what that means is that it becomes a trusted certificate at that point on your machine, only on your machine, not on other people's machines, unless they install your cert on their machines. But this will allow you to, if you're going through the steps and you haven't run through this, and you start running the Sitecore Install Framework, the PowerShell script, you'll get to a point where it says that I can't remember if this was the error related to. I think it will either tell you that it can authenticate the cookie or the cert, or it will tell you that it can't start a website because it's not trusted. I forgot which one it was, which error I specifically got, but make sure you've installed the cert. So next step is now your cert's installed. The next step is really getting Solar to run as a service. So there's two parts to this. The first part is configuring Solar so it knows how to run. So to do that is you actually will need to move these certs to a location that you just will remember the path. For example, this is bin, etc., etc. And then once you're inside your Solar bin folder, depending on the version of Solar that you're using, this could be in a different location. There is a solar.in.command file. If you click on edit and you scroll down, there is a place where you can start configuring your Solar certificate and where it's located. So as you can see, I've actually specified the full path to this Solar cert that I just created. So you should always give your certificate the password of secret, so make sure you always do that. And then there's some other configuration that you should do here. You only need to define it here. You don't need to go down here and define anything. So this is just to overwrite this, but if you overwrite this, then this should be the correct. Make sure this points to your certificate, and then you're set to go. So what you could do is you could actually start Solar. I believe it's solar.start, but this will not start it as a service. That's where NSSM comes in. It stands for the non-sucking service manager. So basically, it's just a tool that allows you to, if you follow the steps for creating it, it basically allows you to go and specify Solar as a service, and then you can define things about it, and it basically allows you to create your Solar implementation as a service. I'm not going to go too much into that. It should be self-explanatory once you go through NSM. And once you get going, you should be able to, you should see, let me just load this up real quick. So I go in my services, and you should see Solar listed here. So, and now I can start or stop it, etc. So this is what I mean by having it run as a service. So Solar is now running as a service. I can tell it to start or stop, and it's all good to go. Another way to know that solar is all set to go is that you can also go to localhost, and depending on what you've configured in your configuration, usually it's going to be port 8983 and then /solar. And then you should see this interface of solar running. Without running the Sitecore Install Framework, you're not going to see any cores configured in your solar instance. This should be visible if solar is running. So if you have it running as a service, you should be all good. If another indication is you need to make sure that HTTPS is working for this, or you're going to have issues when you start installing. Once solar is all set up to go, you're pretty much ready to start running your Sitecore Install Framework commands. There is a script that you should pull down and run. It will basically take care of all the Sitecore Install Framework steps, and you don't have to write any custom code to do anything. So if you scroll down quite a bit, there is going to be this script right here. So you should set this up, create a PowerShell script, which I've done. If you go into my PowerShell scripts here, you'll see that I have install.ps1, and I've just got some basic configuration based off the configuration I had defined earlier. So you're going to define where all your files are. You're going to define just prefixes and things for your site names and things like that. You're also going to define what your solar URL is, which I showed you just a second ago. There's also, you need to specify its path. So that's the C solar 6.6.1. And then just some basic information about SQL. I probably shouldn't show you all this, but this is basics of that. So then there's all these different commands. So let's go ahead and just start describing kind of part 2 to this, which is the next part is defining different. You're going to need to define what topology you want to use. So I mentioned this previously a few minutes ago, and there's basically 3 that you're going to have. You're going to have an XPO, which is probably more common for local development. Developers are going to use XPO more than likely. You're going to basically have access to all the different services and things that are running, but they're not going to be split up in different instances. So you're not going to have website 1, website 2, website 3, whereas here in the local environment, it's as an XPO. It's all in one environment. The next one is XM. This is just content management. So you're not going to have XDB, you're not going to have XConnect or anything like that in this environment. So it's a very simple approach, and probably most local developers are going to want XPO over XM, depending on what you're doing. And then lastly is XP1, and actually it goes XP exponential. Depending on the configuration. This is something, since you can actually do remoting for this Sitecore Install Framework, you could actually set up an XPO or an XP1 configuration in a remote instance, maybe in a content, maybe in some sort of staging environment. You might want to set up an XP1. So choose your configuration, and then you can go out to Sitecore and then pull down the configuration that you've selected. So you selected, and keep in mind we're doing only on-premise. So if you're doing Azure, that's a whole nother topic, which I'm going to be doing here in the next few weeks, probably even the next week or so. I'm going to be doing some Azure discussions about deploying using Azure as well. If we're talking about on-prem, which I'm really just referring to local development, you're going to want to choose one of these options. So as the name suggests, if you just read the description, here's XPO, which is for development. There's XP1, which is for scaled XP development. And then there's XM1, which is for just content management. And it's kind of a simplistic one. So download the one that you're going to use. I've pretended and already downloaded XP1 or XP0, I mean. So once you're done, you're going to want to place that in your resource files. So as you can see, I actually have them listed here already. So I have there's 2 packages for XPO. There's the single, and then there's the XPO XConnect. These are both web packages, web deployment packages. which will be used during the Sitecore Install Framework PowerShell script when it runs. There is some configuration that's also downloaded with that. There's these Xconnect slower JSON. These are kind of like ARM templates, but not in the Azure world, but more in the Sitecore Install Framework world. So you can customize these as well. If you wanted to build a very customized setup for your setup, you could modify these as well. So once you're kind of done with that, you're really down to just running this script. So you've placed in the resource files. One other thing that you're going to make sure that you've included here is that you have included a license file. So it's going to actually look in this path as well to get the license file. And that's based off, I think there's a line here in here. Yeah, right here. So it's going to tell it where the license file is, which is in the PS script root, which is this path. So also this install.ps1 that I'm going to run here in a second, it's also sitting in this resource file. So put all your specific configuration to the environment that you're trying to spin up here in this file. Also, you notice that it's got a bunch of logs. These are logs of previous runs. So I'm going to actually delete all these. So what you can do is I'm going to change this to create another instance right quick. Let's actually give it a different prefix. This is going to get very cryptic. I haven't come up with a good naming convention for this yet, but so assuming you have all that set to go, you can save this change, and now you should be able to just now click play, and this will basically run this install.ps1. But you could also have this install ps1 run from your PowerShell command line or anything like that. So if we go ahead and click play, and it will basically just start doing everything, going through, making sure you have different things set up, and it will just start creating all these things for you. It will create all the Solar instances that it needs. It will create all the web services that it needs to create. It looks like it's got an issue with explaining this doesn't exist. It's definitely there. So I'll try running again. I've had problems like this in the past, so if you get an issue like that, you can just go into the logs. The logs will be a little bit more descriptive than the errors that you see here. I feel like I had this error yesterday and I resolved it. Looks like it got past that issue. So maybe it just didn't respond fast enough. So now here's where it's going into your web deploy files, and it's basically pulling in those XPO web deploy packages, and it will basically install those as well. All right, looks like it's completed. So now we can actually go to this URL and it should work. So we'll just go over here for V. And like I said, it's basically xpo-o2.sc90. As I said, I haven't come up with a good naming convention, but it's basically this. It's taken the prefix and then it's added s.sc90 to it. We can customize this further. This is just the default script that's provided by Sitecore, but we could always take this further and specify these manually if we wanted to. So the site name we could specify separately. So we don't have to exactly follow that. So as you can see, we have the site is loading. Everything that you would expect is in here for Sitecore 9. See the forms and the marketing automation. So that's proof that it's Sitecore 9. So that's pretty much it. I'm sure you guys will run into other issues while running and trying to set up Solar or setting up SQL 2016 or whatever the case may be. If you have questions, please go and leave a comment, or you can even reach out on Stack Exchange. Just tag it with Sitecore Install Framework and leave a question, and one of the experts, might be me or might be one of the other experts, might be able to help you get past those scenarios. All right, that's it. And we cover this basically in one session, so I'm not going to do 2 sessions on this like I originally planned on. And I will be doing more customizations and changes and ways to do some cool things with this Sitecore Install Framework, such as automated deployments and things like that coming up. So, all right, that's it.